Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Sales Emails That Work. It's all about high impact outreach. I'm Paul Leslie, content creator here at Zero Bounce. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your day to join us. Please do let us know, where are you joining us from? Just post a comment in the chat. Wherever you are in the country, or I should say the world, we're delighted to have you. Let's see. All right. So Midwest folks, Kansas, Texas, Connecticut, Philadelphia, Florida, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Wow, we've got quite a crew here. Barcelona, Spain. Hola. Argentina, Tucson, Arizona, St. Petersburg, Florida, Tennessee. Thank you all so much for joining us. Los Angeles, from coast to coast here and beyond. Brighton, UK. I was waiting for one of our friends from the UK to show up from the Milky Way. Okay, so I'm going to introduce today's presenters. We have Austin Helm. He has been on the stage with many Zero Bounce webinars. He's the sales manager at Zero Bounce. His 8 years of grassroots sales and business development experience provides real businesses like yours with actionable email insights. You can learn how to ensure your emails reach your customers' inboxes with his expertise. I can also testify that Austin is a super accessible guy. Be sure to connect with him on LinkedIn. You can scan that QR code there. And also, I want to remind you folks, along the way, if you have any questions, like you have been, feel free to leave your questions in the chat. We are going to try to get to all of them. We do have quite a few people, but we are going to do our best. Zero Bounce is the #1 email verifier for more than 400,000 clients. You might recognize some of those brands there to the right: Coca-Cola, Netflix, LinkedIn, so many others. And I know that many of you all are users of Zero Bounce. With Zero Bounce, we help you get your emails to the inbox where they can be seen and responded to. And it's our pleasure to welcome Patrick Spychalski, Partnerships at Clay. He is the founder of The Kiln. Patrick is on the partnership teams at Clay, where he enables partner teams to use Clay effectively for inbound, outbound, and RevOps use cases. He also, as I said, runs an agency called The Kiln, which helps companies implement Clay for their mid-market to enterprise teams. And to tell you a little bit about Clay, Clay helps your RevOps and growth teams implement any outreach idea. First, maximize data coverage with 100+ enrichment tools and their AI agent with just your Clay account. Then you can use AI to craft relevant outreach at scale. As you can imagine, this is a perfect fit, Zero Bounce and Clay. So I'm going to bring on our presenters, Austin and Patrick. All right, welcome, gentlemen. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you having us.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, Patrick. Good to have you here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, I know everybody out there, what they're really wondering is, what sales emails work? It's a giant $10 million question, but what do you guys think? What sales emails work?
So before we get started answering this question, we're gonna spend a good amount of time breaking it down here. And again, as we're talking, we're gonna probably say some things that are pretty technical. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end. But let's get cracking here. And Patrick, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. You know, we'll keep it pretty casual, but oftentimes I'm on these webinars where we're talking about it ends up talking about social media stuff and other things related to contacts and things like that. But this is my arena, sales, where this is, this is what I do. So I'm excited to talk some shop here.
Yeah, I'm pumped as well. And definitely down to deep dive into this question. It's definitely a more complicated, nuanced one than like a one sentence answer. So,
Yeah, for sure. So I think the best way to start would actually be if we each kind of go through our processes, like what we do from start to finish when we get a lead or a contact that we're interested in reaching out to, or that came in inbound somehow. And then we'll talk through the strategies that we use to get the deals done.
Awesome.
And
Yeah,
I'll
that
let
sounds good.
I'll let you kick that off, being you're the guest.
Sounds great. So yeah, I would say when we work on behalf of our clients, the first thing we want to figure out, which obviously ties kind of deeply into zero balance, is just deliverability. Like when we talk to most of our clients, actually one of their major issues isn't even copy or their targeting. It's actually just the fact that their emails aren't getting to inbox. And so that's usually the first thing we'll address. And that kind of answers partially the question that you asked initially, which is like the sales emails at work are the ones that actually get to inbox. And that's often something that's overlooked. I mean, we've talked to companies that are doing literally billions of dollars in revenue, and we're getting like 5% open rates on their email campaigns. And that to me is one of the first major issues. So I'd say we generally tackle that first. And we can kind of get a little bit more in depth down the line on how we do that. But oftentimes you would be pretty shocked as to how many, let's say, baseline deliverability best practices are overlooked. So first thing we do is usually try to figure out deliverability. Of course, zero balance is a massive component in doing that. Going forward from there, oftentimes finding a list of prospects ranges depending on where you're trying to find them from. So for example, if you're maybe reaching out to people in SaaS, it's probably going to be a lot easier than reaching out to people who maybe are running manufacturing plants. Because obviously you can just go to places like Apollo or Clay or ZoomInfo and source leads into a list. But of course, if you're reaching out to people who are running manufacturing companies, maybe it requires some sort of Google Maps scraping. But in short, the idea is to first source a list. And then after that, it really comes down to figuring out what sort of copy we think will, of course, work for that list and based on the value prop of our client. And so, again, a ton of nuance there. We can totally dive into it. I'm totally open to get going wherever you want with this. But I would say the second biggest thing past deliverability that we see people messing up the most is their copy. And the main thing we see with copy that usually goes wrong is people want to write like a novel when they're sending an email to people. And that's almost always a mistake. So we've seen companies that are doing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue, tons of salespeople, tons of reps on their team, super like quote unquote mature sales organization who are writing emails that look like a PDF document, like super, super long. And we found that obviously quite the opposite works significantly better. We found that like the less characters you can put into an email while still relaying the value prop, while still getting across your offer is usually the most effective. And so we, of course, work on their copy. And we have a pretty set structure for how the copy is oriented, but I would say in general, the main problem is that it's way too long. And then from there, there's a lot of technical work. So building out the Clay table to automate this process so we can send out the same message over and over again, creating personalizations at scale in the tool, finding data at scale with the tool, and then sequencing all of these contacts to a tool like Smart Lead or Instantly. And yeah, I'll stop there. I know I was kind of ranting for a bit, but hopefully that.
No, it's all very good info. And very similar to the kind of thing that we're doing and we're looking to get into. We're actually in a big transition stage in our company because we're now taking it to enterprise level where we have multiple departments of sales and different people coming in at different points during the process. And so that's where something like Clay comes in big time, that can help to just get everything sorted, get the right messaging to the right people, and automate what we're trying to do. But yes, so to go back to the initial point you mentioned about deliverability and starting out, it's really it's crazy how overlooked it is with the just the quality of the data that you have, the quality of the contacts that you have. Everybody has different ways of getting the data that they're using to do their outreach, whether it be from conferences or shows. They have a form on a website, they're purchasing data. Doesn't matter what you're doing. And everybody, I know a million of you in the chat are guilty of it. I've been guilty of it. People give bad information. They'll give you bad email contacts just because they don't want to be contacted. And so first, being sure that you have the correct email address, something that actually exists, is going to be step number one. Just making sure the data is good. Then you get into things like domain strategies, where you're doing, like, if you're doing cold outreach, you have a brand and you have a domain that you really want to protect. You have to be careful with the type of outreach that you do from those domains, because if you do have bad results, you can do a lot of damage to those domains, and then you got all sorts of issues, and that's the brand. So you gotta protect the main domain, and I would recommend actually saving that for the contacts that you're already in touch with, people that are going to respond and that have already engaged. Keep that kind of communication very sacred, and keep that domain sacred as well. So a lot of the packages they have out there, the .net, .org, .com with the domains, using those to your advantage and using different ones for different things can really be beneficial as well. I'm not sure if you guys do anything similar there, but maybe you can chime in as to what you guys kind of do in regards to that.
Yeah, so we have a very long, robust process with regards to deliverability that I actually want to dive kind of deep into. And this is like,
Okay.
in my opinion, some real sauce, because I think we're one of the few agencies out there that kind of remained unscathed during this big deliverability crisis that's happened within the past few months. And obviously, knock on wood, that continues to be the case. But there are a ton of aspects that tie into your emails delivering properly, and also keeping your domain, as you mentioned, safe. So the very first thing that we do when we bring on a client is audit their existing email infrastructure. So a lot of our clients will have already tried to set up email accounts. And it might be using their main domain. It might be using domains that they've set up specifically for sending, which is, of course, what we recommend. But the idea is, first we go into their email infrastructure and see if it's actually set up correctly. And there's a few things that are immediate red flags that it's not set up correctly. The first one is that you're using your primary domain for email sending at scale. That's an immediate no. Yeah. I would highly recommend, if you're doing that, to immediately stop.
100%.
The reason for that being a problem is because if your emails get sent to spam, you will almost inevitably hurt the reliability of your main domain, and people might type in whatever your company domain is down the line, and it'll say like, hey, this could potentially be an unsafe site. So it could actually impact not just your email sending, but your actual website itself. So again, highly recommend do not send from your primary domain. The second thing is that they often use the wrong providers to set up their email accounts. And so we found that Microsoft and Gmail accounts specifically are the ones that you generally want to set up. You will get sold down the line, probably from a lot of different people, a lot of private servers for email sending. I would say, if you're going to look at those, be very wary of their effectiveness. There are some private email servers that work, but oftentimes the ones that are like, hey, click a button and you can set up 100 email accounts at once, oftentimes they end up doing really badly for deliverability. And the reason for that is that private server is usually run by or used by several people. So like, let's say you and 10 other people are on this private server, and one of those people are sending 1 million emails a day using the server. The server is going to crash, and then all of your emails are also going to stop sending. So it's kind of like a domino effect. So second thing is, if they're not Microsoft or Gmail emails, we almost immediately write them off. And then there are some more technical aspects of setting up email accounts. So like the DMARC, the DKIM, the SPF. I highly recommend checking out the plethora of email articles on DMARC, DKIM, and SPF and how to set those up correctly for cold email. That's also very important. So that's just the infrastructure aspect. So we set up usually, we create a bunch of domains that are similar to our client's company name. So for example, let's just say we're doing email on behalf of Zero Bounce. We wouldn't use zerobounce.com. We would use like zerobounceverification.com, zerobouncexx.com, right? And so we're using domains that are similar to that of Zero Bounce. And then we're making it so if somebody types in that domain, it routes back to Zero Bounce's primary domain. But we don't use the actual primary domain. Okay. Because the reason for that is, obviously, if someone gets an email from you and they put in the domain into Google, it should route back to you. Otherwise, they're going to be like, this is a spam. So there's that. After that, we set up 2 email accounts per domain that we create. So let's say we have 5 domains. We'll create 10 email accounts, 2 for each domain. The reason for not creating more is we found that if you create more per domain, deliverability goes down. So then we create 2 email accounts per domain. Those email accounts, we will have send a maximum of 20 emails a day. We don't send any more because, again, we found that if we start sending more, our deliverability goes down. So that's how we set up our email infrastructure for our clients. Obviously, the way we calculate that is how many emails do you want to send per day? And then you break it down based on that. So that's just the infrastructure aspect. There are a ton of other things. For example, like you usually want to use links or images in your cold outbound. That's going to decrease the deliverability. You generally don't want to have a super templated outreach. So this is actually where Clay comes into play. Like if you send the same email over and over and over again, and somebody marks your email as spam eventually, Google and Microsoft will pick that up.
Yep. They just start going up. Yep.
Immediately. Yep. And so then again, another problem. So you want to use personalization in your outbound. You can either do that, of course, manually, or you can use a tool like Clay to do so.
So yeah, let's get into that. I think we kind of nailed the infrastructure and just the setup component of it. Let's get into now the strategy. What do you say? Like, what do you do? What do you put in the content? How do you actually get in touch with these people and get them to respond and then buy? And I think it's like there's science in the infrastructure component. I think the emailing is more of an art. And I think that the general philosophy that you need and general criteria that you need to remember is just that people want to talk to people. Okay. The more you can sound like a regular person, the better you're going to do. See, like you mentioned, too many links, too many images, lingo and actual like words that you're using that sound like a robot wrote it. It's not going to perform well. People get zillions of those a day. Think about when you just look into your inbox and you see and you just visually look at these emails. And if it looks like it's something that's automated, you're instantly turned off. But when you just use your own personality and you put who you are into the actual emails and the conversation, the effectiveness, in my opinion, is just a million times better than anything that's like super cookie cutter, super templated, like you mentioned. And that's what's going to ultimately get delivered better and then get people to engage more, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I quickly want to answer one of the questions I was asked in the chat, and then I'll go back to that general point, but this one seemed like somewhat important. A lot of people are like kind of thumbs upping it. Somebody said, doesn't that throw up a flag to recipients that are worried about phishing using like a different domain? So if we use like zerobouncedeliverability.com, I get asked this question all the time, and just short answer is we've really never seen that have an impact. I think one time ever have I seen that be a problem where somebody's responded and been like, this is like not your main domain. Are you scamming me? We've gotten positive responses from Fortune 500 companies with the most obscenely weird domains. I promise you, like it's much less of a problem than you generally would think it is. But
now, question. So, and just to clarify this for everybody listening with this question, all your signatures and everything and all the metadata and stuff all looks the same. Like it's would be coming from a legitimate rep and
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we keep everything else the same. It's just the domain. And like, again, people investigate this significantly less than you would think, at least we found in our experience. And so I just wanted to touch on that quickly. But back to your original point. Yeah, I would totally agree. Like there are so many instances where I will read an email and I'm like, how did you not think this didn't seem automated? It's so like blatantly like templatized, and there's this email and there's like a bunch of links everywhere. And I'm like, I know you didn't write this out and link all of this stuff specifically for me. Like this is obviously automated. And as a result, I don't want to respond.
Yes.
So
immediately. It's an immediate turnoff.
Yeah. It's like, who wants to
nobody.
No, nobody. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I'll kind of give you like a general idea as to the structure of our email campaigns. So we keep our sequences significantly shorter than a lot of other agencies out there. We obviously do that because we've seen it work quite well, but we keep it usually at 4 emails, and we have these 4 emails specifically sectioned out in different ways. And so with regards to length of the email, we don't have a specific character limit. I know some people say keep it under 100 words. Some people say keep it under 50 words. I think it really depends. But you should keep it very short, like around that range, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a big fan of links unless they're absolutely necessary. Not a big fan of images unless they're absolutely necessary. And we usually have it structured kind of as follows. The first line is usually some sort of personalization about the person to get their attention. So like, usually when somebody mentions a specific attribute about you or your company, it catches your attention a lot more than just like a very basic templated first line. So, and that first line, that personalization, we try to tie it as closely to the value prop as we possibly can. So let's say, for example, I'm pitching clay to people in a cold email campaign. A great first line would be like, hey, I saw one of your reps recently emailed me with a super generic personalized first line. And I figured I'd call that out and I might have a solution for you, right? So like ideally, the first line references some sort of thing that ties into the company's value prop. And that's usually how we approach the first message.
And what's your goal? What's your goal then with the first message? What are you trying to get them to? Are you just trying to get to a meeting? Are you trying to get into a deal right away? What's kind of your strategy there?
Most of our campaigns, not all of them, most of them are to get a meeting. So the goal is usually to get on a call with somebody. We have some nurture campaigns, and nurture campaigns actually work very well specifically for high ticket items. So, if you're selling something that's like, $100,000 million, contract size, I would recommend nurture campaigns. But generally, if you're selling something like a SaaS or like a service that's maybe $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month, I would say probably go more towards a meeting, just for your own time's sake as well. But yeah, and so we usually have that personalized first line. Usually it identifies some sort of problem or some sort of reason we're reaching out. So for example, hey, I saw you're hiring for a CMO. Have you ever considered, maybe using a fractional CMO service as opposed to putting all that money into one person? So again, it just ties into the value prop. The next thing is a very, very quick blurb about what your product or service does and how it solves that problem. So like it should be ideally one sentence. If it's more than 2 sentences, you're probably talking too much about what you do. And then we foray immediately into an offer. And the offer, in my opinion, is the most important part of the email. And so the offer, the definition, at least in my mind, is what are you offering in exchange for a meeting of some kind. So I'll give you like an example of this. Maybe for like, we'll just say we're reaching out to somebody on behalf of Zero Bounce. We'll just say like, hey, figured that you're having pretty bad deliverability right now. Zero Bounce verifies email accounts to ensure that you're reaching out to real people and you won't get bounces. In exchange for a call, I will verify 10,000 of the accounts in your current database to ensure that they're worth reaching out to. Are you interested in hopping on a call? Right. And it doesn't have to be a direct exchange, but the idea is like you provide some upfront value to get them onto a call. So yeah, that's the first message. The second message is usually some reiteration of the value prop, or it may be like a different value prop that you have to offer. The third message is usually improving the offer. So maybe if it's 10,000 contacts, you increase it to like 30,000 contacts, because at that point you've reached out to them twice, they still haven't responded. So you got to do something. And then the fourth message is usually a breakup, and that's kind of how we structure our messaging.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's create the scenario where we've gone through all this, right? And this is always a touchy one. You've sent everything, you've sent the proposal, everything's good. What's your strategy when they don't respond? You get the old ghost.
Oh, so when they like respond, you send a proposal and then they don't get back to you after that.
Yep.
So I think first of all, it really depends on the way in which you position your company. Because I mean, you could kind of do it in like, if you're more of like a playful company, I think Clay kind of positions themselves playfully. You could be a little bit more gimmicky and you could just do something that can like get their attention. Like you see, I mean, like classic example of this, which I think works somewhat well depending, is like the people who like hold up the piece of paper and it's like, don't want to talk anymore. And I'm like, that's kind of gimmicky, but if that's like your brand, then cool. Otherwise, it's pretty difficult, I think, if they go completely ghost on you, other than just like a natural follow-up sequence. We try to keep it as organic as possible, like very short follow-up messages. And, and then of course, like we can potentially improve upon the offer we sent in the third email as like one last ditch. So it's like, hey, figured you might not be interested anymore. What if I offered this? But yeah, we at that point, we generally just try to offer something of value back to them.
I think it's just very important that you don't put yourself in a weak position when you're in that situation. You can't seem desperate.
Yeah.
Sales is a lot like love. And if you just put yourself in a position where you're like showing like you want it a lot more than the other person, then you can just forget about it. It's not happening.
Yeah.
And so, the language that you use is very important in that email, because it's going to determine whether or not you're going to even have a shot in the future. Say they want to come back, or they just totally forget about you and are like, these guys, they need the business. You want to get the sale, obviously, but you also have to be good with cutting your losses and not getting that deal. There's plenty of other deals out there. Don't ever forget that. And then just don't ever say anything that's going to make you look desperate, like you need the sale, because then you look weak. The company looks weak. The product looks weak. Everything looks bad. So you always want to come from a position of strength. Now it's you still want to try to get their attention and get in their face, but know when to. There's definitely a balance there, and you got to know when to just let the time pass and let them come back when they're ready to come back.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. A heuristic I often use is like, if your product was the best in the world and it was obvious that they would it was obvious that if they didn't use it, they would suffer, how would you act? And if you weren't wanting for any more customers, how would you act?
Great point. Yes. Yes, exactly.
And you almost notice that, like, when you work for a great company and you're trying to sell to them. Like, for example, I've done some selling on behalf of Clay in the past, I obviously work with them as well. And it's like, I when I'm on calls or if I'm following up with people, it's, to me, I'm almost, the tone is almost like you're kind of just hurting yourself if you don't want to work with us. It's kind of fine if you don't, and I think that's kind of the way you should approach it. So I completely agree with that point. You shouldn't be begging, because when people beg, it's like, why haven't you closed other people before? Like, what's your problem?
Exactly.
Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. So it immediately throws the flags up, and people think something's up with the product, the quality's not good, and then they think they made a good decision. They're like, I feel totally good with this.
Apologies, I think my light turned. Yeah, it was automatic, and I hadn't moved much.
The power just went out over there.
Yeah. Oh man.
I thought maybe you were giving Austin the spotlight. He was making such a good point.
I was like, I'll just turn off the lights and talk. Yeah.
But it's 100%. People then realize that they made a good decision when that's the case. So it's a very touchy area that you want to be. You really just want to maintain your composure and make sure that you're representing yourself well and you're representing the company well, because ultimately you should have confidence that they're going to come back. Like, if you believe in what you're doing and what you're selling, then usually they do come back. They do after a certain point.
Yeah, honestly, with prospect from our agency, like, if I'm following up after like sending a proposal, it'll just be like, hey, just following up. Like, it's like pretty much all I'll say.
Any decisions made? Yes, no. All right. If so, great. If not, all right. No big deal.
I think it really is the mentality thing, to your point. Yeah, it's just like, if you're confident that you're the best at what you do, then it's like they'll come back eventually.
Yeah, they pick up on that. Even though it's through email, the clients absolutely pick up on that. So be careful. But yeah, just to sum it all up, like Patrick was saying, keep it short and sweet. Believe in what you're doing. Speak like a human being. Don't be automate. Don't. You want to be professional, but you don't want to be too robotic. And so I think people confuse that a lot. They confuse being professional with all this jargon and words, acronyms, and things like that they think makes them seem professional. But in reality, you're trying to sound smart, and in effect, you just sound stupid and stiff.
Yeah. Two things to that point that come to mind. The first thing is that I think another heuristic I very often use is, like, if a fifth grader couldn't read it and understand what you're talking about, then it's not good. Like, don't use a bunch of buzzwords. Don't use a bunch of corporate jargon. It often detracts from your offer instead of adds to it. Yeah, and then the second thing, what was I was blanking on what I was going to say here. Oh yeah, the other thing I was going to say is just, like, if you're still hesitant in not using simple, basic language, I wanted to, like, give this one case study that we had a little while ago. So we were working on behalf of a company that does $2 billion in revenue a year. They have 9,000 people at the company, and this campaign in particular was reaching out to Fortune 500 executives. And the wording, I got almost like dang near an argument with our client about this, because they showed me their copy and it was just full of corporate jargon, and I couldn't even understand what they were trying to get at. And I didn't want to read it, and it was so boring. And I was just like, we need to shorten this and make it a lot more personable. So I wrote my own copy, and they're like, this is way too casual. Like, we're reaching out to Fortune 500 executives. Like, this copy is saying, like, hey, figured I'd connect, like, very basic. And so I eventually was able to convince them to let me try the more casual copy. And that campaign to date has generated, I think, like 30 million in pipeline for them. And it just goes to show that even, like, Fortune 500 executives, they're also still people. Like, they still have the same, brain function as us, in the sense that they want to read something really short, to the point, and gives them value. Like, they don't want to read through a massive thing. If anything, sending them a super long message is inconveniencing them even further than just giving them, like, a 2-sentence offer. So
they got busy days.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then Laurie said, can you share the case study? I actually have the case study on my website, so I can send it to you in the chat really quickly.
So just to kind of piggyback off this now, and then we'll get into questions here in a second, guys. So last thing before we get into questions, Patrick, if you want to talk a little bit about Clay and how the automation comes into play here with this, because I think one of the things, you know, people might assume or might get confused about is, okay, you're saying, you know, be very personable, and, you know, act like a human being. The idea of automation and the idea of being personable kind of seem to conflict in some people's heads. How do you navigate around that?
That's a really great question. And I think it's kind of the root of a lot of people who use Clay and don't immediately find success when they talk to me is because they'll use Clay, but their emails will sound automated. And I think Clay, using the tool or using any automation tool, the goal should be to one-to-one replicate what you would do as a human with automation. And so a lot of that comes down to prompting, actually. So the way in which we do AI generated outbound is we templatize our messages. And so we'll write a set of copy, and within that copy are almost like a Mad Lib kind of our personalization slots. So for example, the first name, that's a personalization slot. The first line with referencing something about their company, that's a personalization slot. And then maybe the value prop, it's the same every time. The offer, maybe that's the same every time. And then a signature, right? So in that example, we're only creating really one personalization, and that's the first line. And the goal of the prompting of this personalization is to make the AI output something that sounds very human. And so, for example, one that we very often do is we'll reference news that comes out about a company. And this is something we really often do if like we don't have anything that ties into the value prop directly that we can find. The first line is literally like, we'll feed all of this news information to the AI, and we'll be like, output the first line to be like, congrats on, and then like 3 words about the news. Like, congrats on the Google acquisition, right? Like that would be as basic as we get it. So it's really a prompting question when you're using a tool like Clay. If you use Clay incorrectly, it'll output a super AI generated sounding first line. But if you give it a ton of parameters and say, output it to sound exactly like this, keep it under 7 words, it should have this exact sentence structure, then you can create personalizations that sound very human-like. And so that's how we're able to do outreach that sounds like, you know, a human's talking to you, while at the same time sending like thousands of them a day without their, you know, reps doing any work.
Mm-hmm. And then ultimately getting the human in front of them. That's the big thing, a big thing for you guys as well, correct?
Yeah, of course. I mean, ultimately, the way we operate is when we get a positive response, sometimes we'll have automated subsequences, but very often it immediately goes to a rep and they get on a call. And so we have automation set up that 100%. Slack a rep, you know, on our client's team saying, hey, you got a response, respond in the next 15 minutes, ideally, and then try to get a call scheduled.
Yeah,
and then,
a lot of organizations are trying to take humans out of the process, and they're you know trying to like make the team smaller, get the sales done somehow through just straight automation and emails and everything digitally. And we've actually now, because everybody's going in this direction, we've leaned into the human direction where we're like, okay, how can we use this to get as many humans in front of as many humans as we possibly can, because people want to talk to humans. So for everybody else that's listening out there, take advantage of the humans that you have in your organization. That's what all of you listening, I know when you call a credit card company or something like that, nobody wants to talk to a robot. Nobody wants to talk to the machines. You want a human. It's no different in any other line of business. So absolutely take advantage of the people you have on your team.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, we really try to only automate the aspects of a rep's job that just are tedious and annoying. But like reps are, if anything, even more valuable now. Because if we're operating at this level of scaled outreach that we are, you're probably taking significantly more calls, and as a result, have just as much work as you did before. It's just different work. And it's work that can't be replicated. Like, especially in sales, I don't think it'll ever get to the point where somebody wants to talk to AI.
No, until we're selling to robots, until robots are paying us money, nobody wants to talk to anybody like that.
Exactly. So there's always an element of having salespeople involved, and some of our larger clients actually stray away from the automated aspect and just use Clay for enablement. Like, just go do research on these 15 different data points for a list of clients and send it to our sales team. It really depends on what approach you want to take. I mean, if you're only reaching out to 300 companies, then just have your sales team do it, and you use Clay to help automate that research process. So yeah, there's a lot that can be considered there.
Well, good stuff. So let's turn it over to the questions now. Paul, are you going to handle? You'll go through these questions and ask them. I know it seems like there's a billion here. We'll try to get to all of them here.
Oh yeah, we've got some brilliant questions. Thank you all so much. Let's get right into them because there are quite a few. So this first one, Vanessa Bright asks, question from a marketer. How should marketing help? Should we write cadences, sequences for marketing activities, follow up, or anything else?
Yeah, I can answer this one quickly because actually some of my clients work on the marketing team primarily, not the sales team. In my experience, marketers have the best. They're usually the best in the organization at relaying what the company does in a digestible way. And so to answer your question in short, it's writing cadences or at least providing information that helps write cadences is super helpful. I mean, like we've even had some of our clients send over ad copy before because their ad copy is literally their best possible attempt of relaying value in the shortest amount of words possible. And so that can be used for outbound. So yeah, I mean, the marketing team plays a lot of strategic role in generating good outbound.
Yeah, I think like, you hear a lot of stories about marketing teams and sales teams not getting along and not liking each other. I think they should be like brother and sister. You should really be in sync with your marketing department because number one, they're fielding their job is to go out and field a lot of the large general audiences that are going to ultimately end up talking to you. So making sure that your messaging is cohesive with what's going on with marketing is a big deal. So absolutely, it's a huge component of the process, and they usually do it very well because they have to reach lots of people. You're very focused as a salesperson. They're much more general. So they get very good at those processes.
Absolutely.
Laura Owen asks, how is Zero Bounce different from Clay?
Okay, so Clay they're completely different tools, and Zero Bounce actually integrates with Clay. High level as to what Clay does specifically for outbound is it allows you to automate outbound at scale. So like you could get your SDR's best message that they're sending out manually to people, and you can recreate it using Clay. And the way you do that is by importing a list of contacts, which Clay can do for you via like LinkedIn scraping, for example. You can then find whatever information you could possibly want on these contacts. So like if it's publicly available online, you can find information about those prospects using Clay. And then from there, you can personalize outbound using AI. So think about ChatGPT. You're just using it at scale. Like let's say there's 1,000 people in a list. You can ChatGPT generate first lines for everybody in that list. And then you can send out email at scale. So it's really great at finding data on prospects. It's really great at automating outbound and has a ton of other cool use cases as well. And if that sounds vague, it's kind of purposeful because there's so much that it can be done with the tool. It's pretty difficult to box it into one thing.
And then Zero Bounce, obviously, we're an email validation platform. We take all the contacts that you end up using with something like Clay and make sure that they are actually real.
Yeah, so when you're finding emails in Clay, Zero Bounce is like the default provider for verifying those emails to make sure that they're actually worth sending to.
Appreciate that.
Excellent. Another question from Vanessa Bright. She says, I am sending emails to a variety of lists. I'm a marketer. I'm promoting a webinar. My old lists are reacting to the message, and I have over 100 people registered, but my new list have 0 clicks. They even do not have the expected percent of unsubscribes. It's so bad. If it's so bad, would people unsubscribe? The email, a text like and super short, is exactly the same. What could be wrong? What do you think?
So the initial thing that would come to mind is what's the quality of the data that list? Are these emails getting delivered? Is there, it sounds like there might be something very fundamental going on, going back to like what we were talking about with the infrastructure and the setup there. Where did this data come from? Is it a purchase list? Did you validate the contacts? Is this actually real? Where are you sending? Are you sending it from the same domain? I would ask a bunch of those questions about the data just before I would go digging into anything else. And looking there, Vanessa.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like if one of the lists is doing well and the other list isn't, I would try to find every discrepancy between that first list and that second list, and then close that discrepancy gap as quickly as possible. I mean, that's really how you're gonna, get the same response rates. I mean, it could be the the ICP being different. It could be the quality of the emails themselves. But again, yeah, I totally agree with all that was said there.
Joshua Lee asks, what's the ideal length for a cold sales email? How does tone impact conversion? And if there's any tips on email subject line best practices. Good
Yeah,
question.
so I'll answer the last one first. Subject line, keep as basic as possible. It should sound like you just quickly typed it in to your subject line bar. Like again, it shouldn't be very complicated. Like if I was selling on behalf of Zero Balance, it would be like company name, invalid emails or something. And I would keep it at that. So keep it very basic. With regards to length, again, there's really not much of a exact threshold for length, but I'd say keep it between let's say 20 to 100 characters generally. And tone is completely contingent on who you're reaching out to. And so if I'm reaching out to marketers, I'm going to sound a lot more bubbly than if I'm reaching out to the CTO of a company. I'm also, the branding, the tone, and generally what we're selling, of course, affects that as well. Like if I'm selling I don't know, toys to people, I'm going to sound a lot different than if I'm selling enterprise B2B software to people. So, I mean, it's really just contingent on who you're reaching out to, and tone is, it just has to be essentially read your audience.
Yeah.
Well.
I think one of the biggest factors, especially when doing cold outreach, is kind of piggybacking off what Patrick was saying. When you're creating the subject line, that's like the presentation of the bait right there. A good exercise is to go through your inbox and just visually look at what your eyes go to initially. You'll see a lot of normally you see a lot of long subject lines with all kinds of stuff and things like that. The ones that stands out are the shorter ones, the ones that, and they'll grab your attention. You're much more likely to just click on that. So make it simple and be very precise about what you're saying, and just get say something that's going to get them to open the actual email. But the first thing you have to appeal to is literally their eyes. Does this look like something that's garbage? Does this look like something I don't want to read? It's got to stick out in order to be of interest.
So here's a good one from Danielle Cambio. 90% of the sales cold emails I receive don't have an unsubscribe link. As a marketer who follows best sending practices, this concerns me. Do you recommend including an unsubscribe in the cold emails?
Yeah, so I think it kind of varies. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. If we're really optimizing for deliverability, unsubscribe links I think actually do better for deliverability down the line, because if they click the unsubscribe link, they won't report you as spam, thus not really sending off your emails as spam. So actually, in short, it's probably better for deliverability, but oftentimes if there's an unsubscribe link, you see it as automated. And so it really depends on how authentic you want your messaging to be. But I'd say if you're sending out really high volumes of emails and you're not super personalized, include the unsubscribe link, and otherwise don't. Of course, it is best practices generally for marketing to include one. If you're sending out a newsletter, for example, you should always have an unsubscribe link. But for cold emails, it can be different.
Yeah. I don't particularly like them because of what Patrick mentioned there. It's an automation robot flag. Like when you see the unsubscribe link, this is going out to a zillion people. This is just more people trying to sell me stuff. For me, it immediately throws up the flag. Be very targeted and confident in what you're doing, and hopefully you're not saying anything or doing anything that's going to trigger you or trigger them to mark you as spam. And know who you're sending to prior to doing this. If you validate your data actually with Zero Bounce, we can tell you which emails are likely to mark you as spam. They're known as abuse emails. So you don't want to send to them. They're valid emails, but they're people that are known to mark you as spam. So we can get those out of there for you. And if you're hopefully you're not sending to anybody that's going to do anything like that.
Yeah, and somebody quickly said in the chat, unsubscribe links are required by law. It's actually opt-out that's required by law, I believe. And so if you are really concerned about it, then you can just put if you're not interested in me sending any emails, just let me know and I won't send anything else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to necessarily be an unsubscribe link.
Don't be annoying, be professional, just be cool. And I don't know if it's with GDPR, it might be law over in Europe. I'm not sure about that.
Probably. It probably is. Yeah. I mean, in Europe, I know they have like much more stringent things.
Yeah.
We usually run our campaigns strictly US, Canada, UK.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
So going to what you were saying about links in cold emails, Joseph Racino says, what about Calendly links in cold emails? Is that still a no-go?
Generally, no. We wait for positive responses from people instead of an immediate Calendly booking. It's not that you can't do it. It's not like impossible to do it. You can maybe get decent deliverability. I would give it a try if you really want to have it, but we found not having them is better.
We don't put them in the body of the emails at all. And I think it's kind in a cold outreach, it's kind of aggressive to like get them to or ask them to book a meeting with you right away. They don't know anything. They haven't talked to you. Trying to get them to book a meeting is like, that's also kind of a turnoff. But putting the link in your signature, totally fair game. Like if you just have a general Calendly link in your signature, absolutely take advantage of that. And if they should go ahead and book, great. But I don't think it's something you want to offer to somebody right away.
Totally.
Another question from Vanessa Bright. What is a good offer when in B2B when there's no offer to give? The demo, how to solve your problem, is not quite an offer. Free consultation doesn't quite fit for this product.
Okay, so in the situation that there's absolutely nothing to offer in exchange for me, like not even like an audit or something of some kind, then, and this is like the only case in which I'll do this, then you can offer something that's more like physical and completely unrelated to their value prop. For example, like AirPods. Like we've like offered AirPods to people who like will hop on a call. And a lot of B2B companies do this with varying success. I'm not a fan of it just because it doesn't have anything to do with your value prop and it feels like you're bribing them to get on a call. And also, when someone offers me AirPods to get on a call, I'll get on the call, but I'm probably not gonna buy your thing. So it's like, there's not a lot of intent there. But that's like the very last ditch for me is like, if there's nothing else to offer, then sure, maybe do something like that.
Yeah, I've actually never offered anything. I think you're immediately putting yourself in a position of weakness. I would stay away from that strategy and just stick to your guns and believe in what you're doing. If it doesn't work out with one person, go to the next.
Yeah. Follow-up question from Joseph Racinos. He asks, I only use information that is given to us at trade shows or on sign up for emails. I usually send the first email manually, then add them to a journey a few weeks later to get rid of those that don't engage. Is this something you would recommend, or should I stop reaching out if they don't interact with that first email?
No, I would definitely recommend if you're going to do manual sending, I think adding them to a nurture sequence doesn't hurt necessarily. Obviously, if you're doing a nurture sequence, definitely include unsubscribe because like that's not, not anything near what cold email does necessarily. But yeah, I don't see that being much of a problem if you're doing manual. I'm definitely interested to hear your thoughts as well, of course. But
yeah, I don't see that being much of a problem either. You do have to be persistent in sales, and there's good figuring out what your optimal cadence is, and like when you're going to reach out, when you're going to follow up if you get no response, and doing those things. There's a lot of experimentation in that, and so figuring out like the time frames in between doing those things. A lot of it has to do with the nature of the product you're selling and the need that the client has. I know, like, just to give you an example, for our product specifically, we don't do any I don't think any cold outreach anymore, just because the nature of the problem we're solving is not something that lends itself well to cold outreach. It's something that people have to have the issue and feel it, and then they're ready to hear about it. It's not something that people are constantly looking at or constantly feeling on a day-to-day basis. So, we've much more dialed in our cadence and our sequences to inbound or to like inbound type sales and warm lead type sales where we're sending you things just to kind of like let you know we're there if you need us, but and spacing that out in between, and then eventually they come in. But it's different for everybody and different based on what kind of product you're selling.
Jason Cogger asks, how are you using buyer's intent info and or website visitor info to your advantage? Are you being honest with prospects that you know they are looking into your product?
It's a good question. With website visitors, I never bring up the fact that they visited my website. I think it's kind of weird. Like, hey, I like snooped on like my website visitor de-anonymization tool when I saw that you visited our website. That to me, I'm not a fan of, and I don't think it works very well. So with other intent data though, potentially, like if they commented on my LinkedIn post and that's my intent signal, then like, hey, maybe I'll say like, hey, I saw you comment on one of my LinkedIn post figures, you might be interested in this. So I'd say it's really just like more of like a social cue situation. It's like if socially it's acceptable to bring up the intent signal, then do it. If it's like a website visitor, I probably wouldn't. And to answer the first question, like how are you using buyer's intent info and website visitor info in my advantage, it's really just a matter of it provides you significantly better lists of people to reach out to. If we have really big clients with a lot of marketing initiatives going on, we don't even use cold lists sometimes. Like we'll just use all their LinkedIn engagers or like all the people on their community Slack channel, or all the people who are liking and commenting on other platforms, right? So yeah, I mean, it builds way better lists. The conversion rates on those lists are significantly higher, and it makes the sales process a lot easier.
Yeah, with that data, I obviously wouldn't mention anything about like, oh, saw you're checking us out or anything like that. I would much more use the data, like you be using the data strategically on the back end to, like, one of the things we do when someone visits, we take their IP, figure out what country they're in, what time zone they're in. From knowing that information, we assign them the proper rep. We don't want to put an American guy on somebody that speaks Spanish. And so we get them somebody that knows Spanish and is much more likely to be able to communicate with them and talk to them in a basic manner. So using it strategically to your advantage and understanding what they want, what they're looking for, who they're most likely to respond to and buy from, 100% use that information as effectively as you can. But you don't need to be like going and telling people like, hey, we saw you're looking, we know you're interested in blah, blah, blah. Just be normal. Be, you use it the way that is going to help you put yourself in the best position of strength you can be in.
Thank you, everybody, for staying with us. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. This comes from Phil Curatillo. What is real spam? If I pull a conference attendee list from a conference specifically geared to my target market and covering the service I provide, could a cold email from me to that list still be considered spam?
I think the term spam is, I'd say, somewhat subjective. But generally, like if they're not opting into you messaging them, then anything that you can send them, I guess somebody could construe as spam. Like if they're not actively opting into you messaging them. With that being said, I don't think anybody attending your conference is going to be reporting you as spam for reaching out to them unless your message is like insanely annoying or like it has nothing to do with their value prop, or you're actually spamming them, like sending them several messages at a time. So that's my general take on it. Like any degree of cold outbound, depending on who you talk to, could be conceived as spam. I think like a lot of our customers are reaching out to mostly like B2B SaaS companies or B2B tech companies. And in that case, I don't think anybody's really seeing it as spam. Like everyone gets those sales messages. They know they have their own sales org doing the same thing. So it's usually not a huge deal, but again, depends.
Yeah, everybody knows what's going on, especially when you go to conferences. Everybody knows they're going to get bombarded by a zillion emails. You're one of the million that they're getting from those conferences. So you really should just be more focused on crafting something that's going to get their attention. Don't be annoying to the point where they're going to mark you as spam, but again, be strategic, figure out what's going to get them to open the email and ultimately engage with you. But no, you should be using that data to your advantage. Get in front of them, figure out what's going on, and hopefully you can get the sale done.
Boriana Antonova says, could you share a bit more about the most obscure email verifications that prevent emails from landing in spam?
The most obscure email verifications that prevent emails from landing in spam.
I'm not sure what it's necessarily asking.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by obscure. Like
maybe she's asking for like tips on how to prevent emails from landing in spam that we didn't mention. That would be my guess. Yes,
possibly.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I mean, so if you don't, I always say, if you don't do what, if you want to do nothing else the one thing you should be doing is just making sure that the data is good, because that's going to eliminate the majority of the problems that you could end up having. So if you are validating the emails and you have actual quality emails that exist, then you're 90%, 95% of the way there. The other things that are going to affect you are going to be things like content, things like your metadata, things like the provider and the server that's actually sending from. Honestly, a lot of times, especially for a lot of smaller companies, it's things that are not really in your control. So DKIM, DMARC, those types of things that might be off, that can affect that. That's where you would look. But if you're validating the data, you should be fine.
Yeah. One other quick thing is turn off open tracking if you have open tracking on, because it pretty much gives you the user, if they use Google, like an automatic way to send you to spam immediately. So just turn off open tracking if you're doing that. That's pretty much the only other thing I could think of.
Joseph says, many of the webinars I have attended recently have stated that email list buying is a straight up no-no. Do you agree?
Yeah, in the conventional sense that like you're going to go purchase a list that they won't reveal to you until you press the purchase button. Yeah, but there are data providers that are great. Like Apollo.io is pretty solid. Clay has incredible data. Obviously, I'm biased by saying that, but it is the best. ZoomInfo, decent, depending on what your ICP is. But you should never like go to a website that says like we have a list and like it's behind this big gate. And if you press like buy for $1,000, it just reveals this list to you and it's like a one-time purchase. Don't do that. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a strategy, and it can be a strategy as you're getting going and trying to build a client base. Obviously, the organic stuff is going to be better. But if you're purchasing data, you absolutely have to validate it. You do not want to trust all the data that you're purchasing.
Oh my
you don't want to trust all the data that you're purchasing is going to be good, and you can just go blindly send to the list you're purchasing. That's a big time no-no, and a very easy way to get yourself in trouble before anything even gets started.
Yeah, and it's gonna be bad data.
It's gonna be. There's
Yuri Tsverkin asks, I use different email warm-up tools and achieve high deliverability for Google Workspace receiving emails, but my emails go to spam on Microsoft 365. What to do? Which warm-up approach would you recommend?
Yeah, so this is another very niche but important thing to ask to overview essentially about deliverability. So there's this thing called domain matching, where essentially Microsoft accounts want to receive emails from Microsoft accounts and vice versa. And so there is a tool called Smart Lead out there. If you're doing automated email campaigns, I highly recommend checking it out. That will help you with automated domain matching for better deliverability. This is a very common issue. And as time goes on, deliverability is probably going to get harder and harder. It's already gotten quite difficult, as kind of you can probably tell by the million things I've talked about so far that you need to do. But yeah, in short, I would check out Smart Lead for domain matching.
Yeah. What was the beginning part of the question again, Paul?
Beginning part was what to do basically about them going to spam on specifically Microsoft 365.
Okay. Yeah. It's pretty much basically what Patrick said. You got to dig into what's going on with the actual provider themselves and understand why that might be getting flagged. There could be a bunch of different things. I know, I don't know the specifics for Microsoft, but I know like Google, Yahoo, a bunch of those based ones, they now look for DMARC policies. And if you don't have a DMARC policy, it'll affect your deliverability rates, especially if you're doing volumes of 5,000 or over. So figuring out what their criteria is that they are looking for is going to be, and then implementing that obviously into your strategy is going to help you to deliver to those specific domains, because it's all generally the same, but some have slight differences.
Rusty Daniels asks, you mentioned limiting images and links in your emails. Thoughts on having those in your signature?
Significantly better if you have them in your signature. So if you're going to have them in your signature.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. You don't want to go crazy, but you can get away with it. Like, if you got a picture of yourself, link to your calendar, link to your company's website, you're going to be fine.
Jenny Hill asks, we have two divisions of our company. One is B2C. Do these same strategies apply to a B2C audience?
I would say almost across the board, no. Actually, like this is mostly B2B centric. B2C, you're gonna have to send it so much higher volume, and I would definitely not recommend spamming consumers about your product. So, in short, I would probably not do any of this for B2C. I would just stick to like more marketing, like generic B2C marketing based automation software.
It's crazy how different my behavior is. Like when I'm looking at my work email versus my personal email, I'm so much quicker to get pissed when I'm looking at my personal email and I'm getting something that just looks like somebody's trying to sell me something versus when somebody's reaching out professionally and communicating with me through my business email. I don't know if anybody is the same, but yeah, you definitely have to be much more careful reaching out B2C because they just get inundated with all kinds of stuff. So much more likely that you can get marked as spam when reaching out to consumer emails. So keep that in mind.
We've got one more question from Jenny Hill. What email in your cold outreach sequence would you include in the ask for a meeting?
My answer is I do it in the first email. I'm pretty to the point, unless it's a nurture sequence in which I generally don't ask for one at all, except for maybe like very late in the sequence. Depends how aggressive you want to be, though. I mean, I'm a big fan of asking pretty much off the bat. Maybe I won't be like, let's get on a meeting, but I'd be like, any interested in talking more about this or something like that. So it's not like, let's get on a call. Are you free tomorrow? It's more like, any interest in hearing more about this, and then usually that leads to a meeting.
Yeah, I think there's no harm in leaving it as an option. Like if you're like framing it as if you're interested in a meeting, or like if you're interested and you want to speed this process up, we can just hop on a call and we can talk and get it done. There's no harm in adding that little blurb into your mail just to throw it out there in case they want it. But come from the point, like the perspective of service, like you're serving them and helping them and just trying to assist them getting whatever it is they're trying to do across the goal line. Be there if they need it, but don't be like, let's get on a call. We need to meet. That's not gonna, nobody's gonna like that.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for all your questions. Now, gentlemen, anything to kind of tie this all together as we close here?
I'm pretty much, yeah, sorry,
Patrick,
go ahead.
if you want to go through what you guys are like, again, just go through Clay and talk about what you guys offer, if there's anything like promotions you want to give or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're super low on time, but I would just generally say I would highly recommend checking out Clay. And obviously I'm biased in saying that, but like it truly is, like, to our point before, it's like when you're selling the best thing possible for your audience, like that's how I feel about Clay. It's like you should just at the very least check it out, even if it doesn't seem to apply to what you do. And obviously feel free to follow me on LinkedIn as well. I post a ton about Clay and the residual tooling around that.
Awesome, thank you. And from Zero Bounce's perspective, you guys can, if you guys reach out to me directly, austin@zerobounce.net. I believe Zach, or if you could put my email in the chat, Zach, austin@zerobounce.net. You can reach out and we can give you a free test of the service. 5,000, we'll validate 5,000 emails for free, and you can check it out, see if you like it. Other than that, thank you everybody for helping out. Paul, thanks for hosting. Zach, thanks on the back end. And Patrick, of course, thank you for joining us. It was great to have you here, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you everybody who joined. I know we will have a couple more webinars coming up, but again, feel free to reach out, and we will see you guys on the next one.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
All
Thanks,
right.
Patrick.
Thank you. Everybody out there, thank you for joining us. You'll have a great day.
Take care, guys.
Till next time.